Good evening, everyone. We're now live. If I could seek your attention, thank you very much. Welcome to the meeting. I'm Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of Scrutiny Commission. Members of the Commission present this evening are Councillors Anthony Amatharaj, Stuart Gawley, Ross McKinnon, Eric Pattenden, Justin Pemberton, Richard Sumner. No, not Richard Sumner, because we've got Howard on here, sorry, Christopher Reed and Howard Wollaston. So we've actually got 4 people down for you. So sorry about that. Councillor Lee Dillon, the leader of the council, might be joining us later. And we have Councillor Ian Cottingham joining us via Zoom. Welcome to Councillor Cottingham. Council officers present to advise and support the meeting are Paul Coe, Interim Executive Director for People, and Joseph Holmes, Executive Director for Resources. Also present is DCI Emily Evans from Thames Valley Police. Welcome, thank you for coming. Gordon Oliver is the clerk for the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and Vicky Phoenix is the Zoom host. Before we start proceedings, I would like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone participating in the meeting to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak directly into the microphone and to switch them off when finished speaking. If we hear the fire alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exit. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Oh, okay, thank you very much. Do we have any apologies, please, Mr. Oliver?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Paul Dick and Councillor Howard Wollaston is present as his substitute. We've also received apologies from Councillor Jeff Mays and Councillor Stuart Gawley is present as his substitute. And in addition, we've received apologies from Councillor Martha Vickers, Superintendent Helen Kenny and Nigel Lynn.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Moving on to the minutes. Hopefully you've all got a copy of the minutes. So we've had 2 meetings so far. We've got the one on the 20th of June. Can I check that this is a true and correct record of the meeting? Any changes required to those minutes? No, do I have a proposer? Councillor Wollaston, seconder. Councillor Pattenden, all in favour? That's unanimous, thank you very much. And then our minutes of the meeting on the 17th of July to check whether they are a true and correct record of the meeting. Do members have any comments on those minutes, sorry? No. Okay, do I have a proposer? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gawley. Seconder, Councillor Amatharaj, thank you very much indeed. Great. So a vote. I knew what to forget. Can we have a vote on the minutes, please? Everyone in favour? Thank you. You're not okay, thank you. So is that an abstention then? Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Great. So actions from the previous meetings. So we have a grid in our paperwork. Oh, beg your pardon. Declarations of interest. That's the wrong way around. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So actions from previous meetings. I think we've got a grid in here with various things. Do members have any comments on that? Okay, I've just got one comment on this. One of the actions we had from the last meeting, as you know, we had the call-in for Monks Lane and we discussed that, and one of our resolutions was to ask for costs related to that project. That isn't in the grid. However, I have consulted with the Director of Finance and other councillors about this. My understanding is that the figures are going to go to executive in November and won't actually come to this meeting, and that is due process. So just so you're aware of that. As you are no doubt aware, after the meeting we had on the 20th of June, I went to the subsequent executive meeting and I read out a statement to say that I wasn't happy with the paper that had gone from Scrutiny Commission to executive. I felt that it conflated the content of the call-in, which the then Liberal Democrat opposition had made before the election, with the resolution that we made at that meeting. And my concern was that we needed a true and accurate record for future reference so that when people go back and look at the document, they know exactly what it was we discussed at that meeting. So I did make that statement at that executive meeting. It also came to my attention that the paper did not have, it wasn't run by me or the portfolio holder before it went to executive. So I would like to ask officers this evening, please, that if any papers go from this commission to the executive in future, they do get run past me. And if I'm incapacitated, they should be run past our Vice Chairman, Councillor Bowick. And also they need to have the correct name of the officers at the top as well, because I'm aware that several officers contributed to the drafting of that paper. So they either need to have all of those officers' name on or the name of the most senior officer signing that off. So as I go along, please do let me know if you don't agree with any of what I'm saying. So subsequent to all of this, last week in my capacity as chairman of Scrutiny, I and the leader of the council and the chief exec and other senior members of staff received a letter from Mr. Alan Pearce regarding the judicial review that he bought earlier this year and requesting reimbursement of his legal costs of just over £100,000. So it's incumbent upon me to let you know as a commission that I've received that in my capacity as chairman. He makes a number of points in there. What I will say, I was a member of the Western Area Planning Committee in the previous administration, and at the meeting that we had then about Monks Lane, we were told that the Monks Lane Sports Hub facility was going to be a replacement for Faraday Road. We had a subsequent district planning committee meeting where we were told it was not a replacement. I know that since then there have been 2 executive papers saying it is a replacement. And in the judicial review, the council said to the High Court it was not a replacement. So I feel it incumbent upon me as the chairman of this commission. We are here to make things accountable and transparent, and we will all have different views on this issue, and it's gone on, and I'm sure a lot of people are fed up of hearing about it. But the fact remains that this issue is not over. There is still money in the capital budget for this project, and the planning permission for Monks Lane is still in existence. So I think this is something that we need to return to in the future. It's not our place to do it now because the costings are going to go to executive in November. But the Director of Finance has reassured me that if we as a commission are not content with the discussion that happens at executive, we can do an additional piece of work to review the project, and we can call witnesses as well. So that would involve members of the public. So I will leave it there for the time being. I know that Councillor Dillon, when he was leader of the opposition, did do a call in January 22, I believe, asking for a task and finish group with witnesses. So I was going to ask him this evening what his view was on what I just said, but he's not here. But whether he concurs that that is still a good idea or not, we will wait to see. So I will be observing what happens at executive. I will look at the figures when they come through. I will make sure that you as members of the commission see all of that and can have an opportunity to give your feedback. And then I think at a future meeting, we need to decide whether or not we review that, because it's not over. Thank you for indulging me. Does anyone have any comments on what I've just said? No. Okay, grand. Thank you very much indeed. So is there anything else on that grid of actions coming out of the previous minutes? Everyone happy with that? Very good. Right, so that's just to note. We don't need a vote on that. So do we have any petitions, Mr. Oliver?
No petitions received, Chairman.
Thank you. And now we move on to our first substantive item, which is the community safety update. The Scrutiny Commission is designated as the Council's Crime and Disorder Committee. As such, it is required to meet at least annually to review or scrutinise decisions made or other action taken in connection with the discharge by the responsible authorities of their crime and disorder functions. So I'd now like to invite Officer Paul Coe and DCI Emily Evans to present this item on behalf of the Building Communities Together Partnership. And following the presentation, we will open it up to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So the first slide there is essentially a bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about. We'll set out the partnership, its roles, its responsibilities, talk a bit about the annual strategic assessment, have a look then at some detail in terms of the current crime position, and talk also about some of the partnership working activity that we're currently undertaking. Next slide, please. So the Building Communities Together Partnership is the community safety partnership for West Berkshire. As you can see there, I won't read them out, but we're operating within a legislative context, which is clearly set out, and includes a number of statutory partners, including the Council, Thames Valley Police, the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, probation, and also we've got health partners, including the Integrated Care Board and our public health partners as well. Next slide, please. We recently reviewed the terms of reference in April 2023. A really important part of what the partnership is about is the core community safety partnership duties. We're also responsible for some new serious violence duties, and the partnership fulfills the roles of the Prevent Partnership Board for the local area and also the Youth Offending Team Steering Group. We're saying that as well as the statutory partners, we have a range of additional partners, including reps from the voluntary sector, Health Watch, housing as listed there. So a number of other partners participating together. And next slide, please. In terms of accountability, we're saying that we have we are accountable to a range of stakeholders. Of course, the local community, Home Secretary, Home Office, Ministry of Justice, particularly in relation to the work of the Youth Offending Team. And also we connect closely to the safeguarding partnerships, both for children and adults. Thank you. Next slide. So in terms of our objectives, you can see them there. Obviously, we're about reduction and prevention of crime where we can, making sure that we fulfill our statutory responsibilities, keep track of and respond to the changes in what we're seeing in terms of the nature, incidence and severity of crime within the district, safeguarding those who are vulnerable, and helping people and communities to help each other. I think that's a really important part here. It's a partnership which should be reaching out and connecting to the wider community. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we speak a little bit about our annual strategic assessment. So it's a really significant piece of work, making sure that we collect a wide range of data, which is to tell the partnership about what's going on in the local area, what we're worried about, what we should be turning our attention to, based very much on available data. You can see a timeline there in the sense that we collect the data, do the analysis, have what's called there a diagnostic conversation, and that's an annual, obviously an annual cycle, so that we are doing work that reflects the reality for our local community. Connecting also to then feed through into the partnership plan, which also needs to take account of other local strategies and plans. And I'll hand over at that point at the next slide to Emily.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Evans. I'm the senior detective here in West Berkshire. Some of you may know me from my former role. I was the deputy commander here for 2 years before that. So hopefully I've got a good understanding of the crime in the area and obviously trying to keep it as safe as possibly can. So we're going to talk firstly about domestic abuse. We have seen an increase in domestic abuse, which has gone up only by 9%, which is still fairly low numbers. But we think this is around that people are more willing to support domestic abuse allegations. There are more accounts taken from friends and family around concerns, which we have done a lot of work to publicise the support that we can give around domestic abuse, which will probably explain this. And we do a lot to try and keep victims safe and keep them engaged. So lots of work with the partnership as well around this. Next slide, please. An area of focus for us, and as a senior detective, I'm the lead for violence against women and girls. So the partnership have completed a street safe survey. We had quite a good response from the public actually around this, and we're looking at safe spaces. So this is a fairly sort of societal issue in about where women and girls feel safe to walk. So the underpasses here in Newbury always come up as an area where people are quite frightened of, don't want to walk at night. So trying to sort of increase lighting, cut back bushes, anything that we can do to try and make women and girls feel safer to come into our towns and obviously make the most and enjoy themselves. They shouldn't have to worry about the fear of being a victim of crime. We've done some summer campaigns and also quite a lot of work in the town centre and out in the villages as well, in the sort of like the seldom heard communities, so those harder to reach communities around this area of policing. So we're quite passionate about it and obviously want everyone to feel as safe as they can be. Ask for Angela testing is a campaign that we've done. I don't know if you're aware of that. And we've sent sort of test purchasers, if you like, spies out for us to ask the publicans if, when they ask for Angela, the right support, because they should have had that training. And we've succeeded quite well, so that's good. So they are listening to us through Pub Watch. So that seems to be working pretty well. Next slide, please. So we have obviously myself as the DCI, and we have a DI as well that looks at all the sexual offences that come into the police station. Some are fairly low level and are dealt with by our sort of incident response teams, but others are dealt with by our CID. So we make sure that we scrutinise all these offences and do what we can for the victim to try and push that through. To try and keep victims engaged, it's really important that we try and speed up the process as quickly as we can, because sometimes if you're waiting for CPS decisions, that can victims can disengage and just sort of lose that passion and will to support. So that's really important for us. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've just given you some names then around who are our leads in this area that we devoted about a lot of time. We've had a conference that was held in Reading fairly recently, where we sort of invited members of the community as well to come to the conference to sort of increase awareness and have lots of talks and presentations, which was quite successful. So that's good. On to the next slide, please. So county drugs lines. We don't actually have any active at the moment, which is positive through quite a lot of disruptive work. We've had Op Fides, which was the arrest of 3 suspects. One was part of a county drugs line, and then it's led to obviously other offenders being identified through some lines of inquiry, and they are now in prison awaiting trial and hopefully sentencing. But that's caused quite a lot of disruption, which was good. I think hopefully a good bit of community reassurance and took out those opportunities for the drug dealers and those, those vulnerable that were caught up in that as well. We have a tasking team that work hard in the hotspot areas, that are out and about in plain clothes, utilising plain vehicles and hope to not get stopped, to build intelligence and then to search people. And actually our powers around stop and search have really improved. We've done a lot of training with it with the younger officers and given them the confidence and the support that we have to have the confidence to stop and search people. Okay, next slide, thanks. So we have the lowest number of knife crime offences in Thames Valley Police, which hopefully will be reassuring. We have fortnightly knife crime meetings and where we discuss those habitual knife crime carriers and look at ways of disrupting them and make sure they're shared on the briefings as well, so that all the officers know who to look out for and then who to stop. And if they have the right powers, obviously to search them to make sure they haven't got any knives on them. And where we've had those offences as well, we have utilised our powers under Section 60. We have one in place at the moment, actually, up in the Nightingales, that's just come into power today, which gives officers the powers to stop and search anyone in that vicinity. And they don't need any other powers or grounds to do that. So hopefully that will give the community some reassurance and confidence that we are doing our best to keep them safe. So serious violence reduction orders. I know you don't like acronyms, so we've included that in there. Sorry about that. This is a new power and a new order that's been brought into force in April. We've had one of the first successful cases, which is good. And those orders will be monitored by the neighbourhood teams as well, so that we, although they have the order in place, we're making sure that we know everything about that person and to make sure that we keep people safe that are associated with them, and also that we're on their backs. We don't let them rest, really, so they don't reoffend. That's our plan. Okay, next slide, please. So we've had a 1% reduction in violence with injury in the last 12 months, so fairly insignificant change. However, this is like fairly low level of injury, with 713 of the 870 being ABH level. So this is in line with the overall trend in the force. So a lot of these will be domestic abuse and then offences in the town centre that we obviously focus a lot on at weekends in particular around our night safe operations. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so violence without injury has gone up by 16% in the last 12 months. This shows there's been an increase in violence, but the harm has reduced significantly, which is a positive. But this can be around shouting, around that threat of violence, around pushing, those low-level offences, but they are correctly recorded. And we've done a lot of scrutiny with our officers to make sure they record them properly. The sergeants, so the first-line supervisors, then scrutinise them even more just to make sure that we've got the correct classification so that we fully understand about what's happening at the moment, what's causing us the most pain. So again, we have a TTCG, which is our Tactical Tasking Coordination Group that's held fortnightly, which is either chaired by myself or Helen Kenny. And we look around what our priorities are, who our key nominals are, and make sure that we disrupt them properly and effectively. And that's a partnership meeting as well. So we have others dialing in as well to give their contributions around that. For the 30% reduction in serious violence in the last 12 months, which includes GBH, those offences, and murder, obviously, which is positive. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so neighbourhood action. I think when I talked earlier on in the year, I explained around the fact that our neighbourhood teams are having to support our frontline teams at the moment due to the rise in numbers and trying to get them all through their training. But we have maintained that neighbourhood support where we can and still will. We just really need that focus. So we are expecting an uplift in officers for neighbourhood policing. And as we move over into our new model with sort of merge with the other police areas, hopefully our neighbourhood teams will increase. But that won't change the footprint of the officers that are actually in Newbury Police Station. So please don't be alarmed. You'll be able to, the response times won't change and hopefully they will actually improve. We're still able to do all our engagement as effectively as we can. We've obviously got the outer station at Thiel, which we co-share with the fire service and the ambulance. And we've got Hungerford as well. So we try and reach out to those communities as best we can because it's a large patch. So it's quite challenging to make sure that you have officers everywhere. So we work hard to make sure that we're at the engagement events. And particularly, we've done a lot of work around water safety. Sadly, we lost a little boy, didn't we, now a couple of years ago in the canal. And since then, we've had the water safety meeting, which has been quite successful. And actually, other local authorities have then done the same because of the canals and extensive waterways that we have here in Berkshire. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so there's just a slide on antisocial behaviour, public space protection orders. So during the last year, along with the BCT, we've managed to implement the public space protection orders in Thatcham, which means as an LPA, we currently have 3 active ones, including the town centre and Speen Lodge. There have been 3 breaches in the last 12 months of these PSPOs. There's just a bit of a breakdown then on the counts to read those. Thank you. So we've had some successful house closures. And just to give you an example, we can actually partially close a house so that if we don't want everyone that should be in that household to live there because of their disruptive activity, we can move some of them out, which is quite a good power actually. And our neighbourhood teams are quite engaged in that process. And it's meant that we've then dispersed groups that were causing us harm, such as in the Nightingales, which has been quite positive. The criminal behaviour orders as well. We have no criminal behaviour orders in the last 12 months, but that's an area of focus of us. Pete Duffy is actually returning to our team, so we'll do some really good work around that. And the community protection warning notices. So they are around the persistent ongoing antisocial behaviour in West Berkshire. We've only issued 5 in the last 12 months, so fairly low numbers, but still shows that those powers are around. And then this is for us collectively, isn't it, Paul? So we've both Paul and I sit on the domestic abuse board, so run that together. So we do lots of campaigns, awareness raising. One area that's been really positive is the lived experience group that we have. that our individuals are coming forward to speak around the domestic abuse that they've suffered, and encourage those that have been suffering it and don't come forward to come forward and have that power. And that can be talking around, some of the middle-class families that suffer domestic abuse find it really difficult. They don't want that, like, their lifestyle to change. So trying to give them that right support has been really positive. County drugs lines as well, around the need to know sessions, the intelligence submissions. So we have intelligence forms that we can send out to partner agencies because they come into contact with young people, criminals, in a different way to us. Perhaps they'll get a little bit more from them than we might on occasions, and they can submit those forms. So that's been quite positive as well. Don't know if you wanted to say anything else, really. But I do think those house closures have been particularly successful around that disruption of the young groups causing us mainly harm. So that's positive. Thank you.
Did you want to add anything to that, Mr. Coe?
No, thank you. Just to reiterate Emily's point, this is where the partnership adds so much, because we're coming at this collectively with our various assets and resources and working together.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, DCI Evans, for coming along and giving that presentation. So members, do you have any questions that you would like to ask? Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you. I'm the ward member for Lambourne, and the two things that can constantly come up from my residents are firstly speeding, and how we can get more speed limits put in particular 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in Eastbury and in Lambourne, High Street, and secondly on the B4000 Ermine Road, or Ermine Street, I'm sorry, down to 40. We've had a number of accidents there, and every time I've tried to get those speed limits imposed, I've come up with resistance from TVP that they can't enforce it, and basically I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. I'd like to know how we might try and change that. And the second issue that comes up is drugs. I hear what you say about county lines, but we've got problems in Lambourne. We're literally 2 miles from both Oxfordshire and Wiltshire, and we've got a big drug problem. Probably encouraged by the racing industry, if I'm being honest.
Okay, so I think Justin, you had a question as well around speeding, didn't you? You've already prepared.
I did, yeah.
Don't know if you want to we can cover both at the same time.
I was going to say, and sort of feeding into that, when I was doing a bit of research for this meeting, it sort of struck me that the number of speeding convictions across the country had doubled in the last sort of 12 years. But I think in reality, the uplift in those offences is likely to be much higher, because detection and enforcement rates have seem to have come down. So I'd like to know if we could get some information around trends for all categories of motoring offences locally, and also a bit of insight into what action is being taken by TVP to sort of enforce safety standards on the road more generally.
Yeah, so we have as sort of a traffic department, if you like, that are sort of joint with Hampshire, and they are obviously policing in our area around speed enforcement. They will go out to the villages, but it is probably more challenging. We have our neighbourhood teams that do speed enforcement on occasion, and certainly if you have had accidents in a road that are recorded and they do feel that there are concerns around that particular area of road, we can campaign to try and reduce the speed limit there. So I'd definitely be interested in doing that, and obviously your local sergeant for your area in Hungerford will look to support you in that. So we've got Dan Lond at the moment that's working there, if you know Dan, or Andy Murray, that can support you for that. We can get involved with the community as well around those speed watch campaigns. So always happy to do that.
Okay.
And in terms of drugs, I think it's about building the intelligence picture. We can't always be everywhere, and sometimes in those quieter villages that cause us less calls, the patrols won't always be there. So it's around understanding what the intelligence picture is. So if you have any, I would urge your community to share it, because if we have that intelligence, we can then get the officers to those areas. We do know that we've got some pockets in Hungerford that are causing harm, so we could, that's going to be an area that if we're going to patrol that in Hungerford, we can come through Lambourne, just to try and raise the profile and visibility. So happy to take that away.
Can I just quickly ask a supplementary to that, DCI Evans? You mentioned the names of some of your colleagues who are responsible for different areas with regard to speeding. I think after the meeting, it might be quite helpful to members that are here tonight and also who are not present, if they could get hold of the contact details of those individuals, and then if they need to contact them, because I'm sure all of us have had complaints from members of the public about speeding, and it can be quite an intractable thing to try and get any sort of action on it, 20-mile-an-hour zones or the 30 or the 40-mile-an-hour, etc.
Well, should I send those through?
That would be really helpful, I think. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Pattenden.
That would be useful as well. And in fact, it's not just a problem in Lambourne. As a councillor for Greenham, the A339 Sandal Link is a racetrack. And over the summer, it's been a really, really noisy racetrack. It's a problem every night of the week, I think.
And we had a fatality there.
Exactly. I don't know how that.
On Monday evening. So.
Yeah, I don't know the circumstances of that, but it's been a very, very noisy racetrack over the summer. To follow on from your point, Councillor Culver, about contact lists, I think that would be really useful. Is there also are there also places that where it's possible to have speed vans, monitoring, and if so, can you provide us with a list of those?
Yeah, I mean, personally, we don't do the speed vans ourselves. We can obviously have speed patrols that we can put out, but the speed vans themselves obviously work with our neighbourhood teams, but also go out and do that themselves. So they're not sort of members of our teams that do that. But there are opportunities to do speed enforcement. It's just having the right number of officers. And unfortunately, because of the uplift, we've been trying to support the frontline teams who are obviously racing to those grade 1 incidents and responding to those. So it's, it is a priority for us, and keeping people safe on the road is so important. So anything that we can do to support it, we will try our best.
Okay.
Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chair. Question to DCI Emily Evans. I agree with Councillor Wollaston and Eric as well. Speeding is a problem from Lambourne Road to Grove Road, where residents conduct a lot of speeding trials with the speed devices and report a number of speeding issues. But it's the enforcement is the problem, I think. But since it is covered, I would like to ask a separate question, which is related to theft, household theft and burglaries, which is not covered in this report, which is a serious issue in Thames Valley because of the targeted attack on Asian community and elderly. On the 28th of August, Home Secretary has said that every police must investigate every theft and follow all reasonable leads. But the chair of the Police Federation said that its officers were stretched beyond human limits. Do you concur with this? And is Thames Valley, if not, if Thames Valley Police's resources are enough to deal with all theft cases? And what kind of assurance will you give to the residents and communities that their theft reporting cases will be investigated?
So I can confirm that all burglaries to houses, to dwellings, are attended by officers. So they will have a first response of a uniformed officer if it's out of hours. And ideally, if I can get the burglary team to attend that burglary in the first instance, like one-touch policing, that's what we'll do. We will always go to burglaries that happen in people's homes, because we know around the harm and trauma that can cause. And it's really important as well that we obtain the right level of evidence. And sometimes our inexperienced officers don't know how to obtain that evidence, don't ask the right questions. So actually, if we have our specialists going to those incidents, we can get a really clear picture and try and catch people. We had a burglary in Speen over in the summer, over bank holiday weekend, It was an offender actually from the Slough area, so someone that wouldn't normally come to Newbury and commit crime. And he was found in a stolen car in Milton Keynes the other evening, and he's been charged and remanded for our offence, which is really, really good. Because we were worried about a series that had started to pop up in sort of like Bucklebury and Speen, where it was unlikely that we would be able to identify who the offenders were. So I give you that 100% commitment that we always attend those burglaries. In terms of thefts, where we have a witness theft, we will always get officers out to take a statement from the victim and treat them, obviously give them professional service. We do have a triage system now that is run from a different department that is stationed at Reading. So if it's a low level offence, then we may just give a slightly slower response. We will get to it, but it will be a slow response from a different department that have that time and the officers to deal with it. But so it won't occupy the time of our frontline staff. So we are stretched to a certain extent, but we will always commit to managing our crime here. You know, crime is manageable for us here in West Berkshire. Sometimes it's more challenging, but we just have to catch up.
Okay, thanks for the assurance. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Sorry, so Chris Reid from Bucklebury Ward. We really appreciate the PCSOs that we've got in our area. They're very effective, really good listeners as well. However, when they come to do a survey in the van, can you give us a bit more than 4 days notice? Because then we can get the message out and then we can get a lot more attendance at those kind of events.
Yeah, no problem. That'll be fine, because it's really important that everyone's there. And I know that you would pull together as a community. So that's really important. And they are very visible. So yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Councillor Burke.
I have a question, first of all, to Councillor Pattenden, to your comments that the A339 is like a racetrack. Did you use that term as a euphemism, or do you have suspicion that people are actually racing? I'm not challenging you, it's relevant to my experience in my ward.
No, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a racetrack. It was a anecdotal comment. I don't know if it is or not. It may well be.
Okay, thank you. But Inspector Evans, thank you very much for your presentation. We do have a problem in Aldermaston Ward where it is believed that young men are racing high-powered vehicles Sunday evenings, late into the night. And I live in Brimpton, and I've experienced the noise and the quantities of vehicles passing through what is a very rural setting. I've raised this before with Inspector Aziz, and I was told that there's little that you can do because they're not spontaneous, but they use different routes. We're not quite sure where they gather, where they end, what the purpose of their racing is. But I think there's some work that could be done there to gather intelligence and try to stop this activity before somebody is seriously hurt.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we have the intelligence or information about it happening, or if you were to call it in as a live crime, because it's dangerous driving, isn't it?
Trouble is they're passing through and they're gone,
No, but if they're using the A4 and you get a description of some of the vehicles, then we can work with that. We can get officers there pretty quickly to the A4. It's one of our busiest roads, and we can then try and catch them, can't we? And try and understand what that intelligence looks like. We've got ANPR cameras, so we can hopefully trace them in that way if they're in convoy. There are some opportunities there for us to disrupt that behaviour.
Thank you.
Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Chairman. I think everyone's got a question for you tonight. I want to ask you about the Ask for Angela initiative that you talked about earlier on. Do you have any idea how often that's used? Do you have any data about how useful a tool it's been for women and girls in the nighttime economy?
So I don't think, to my knowledge, that it actually has been used as a live case. So we haven't actually had any young women that are concerned that someone's going to cause them harm, which is quite reassuring.
Right.
So that may be because we've got quite a lot of visibility in the town centres. Our town centre is relatively safe, but we do have sexual offences that take place. but they may be able to get help in different ways. But we have tested it. So I think it's important for us to know that we've tested it and it worked and the publicans responded in the right way.
Good. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay.
Councillor Gawley.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, DCI Evans, for your time this evening. My question really relates to one of our kind of key areas in our communities, and that's around our shops and our retail space. Seen a lot in the media recently with regards to shoplifting and theft from stores and a kind of increase in that. Is that something that we're seeing in kind of Thames Valley as well?
So yes, we have seen an increase in theft, with I think the community just sort of being quite vulnerable at the moment around the cost of living. I think that has seen an increase in shoplifting. And also our attendance at shoplifting is not as, we don't respond in the way that we used to be able to, just because of our numbers on officers, and it isn't seen as a priority. So we are trying to work with our retail companies, particularly the big ones, around giving them the right support. They have their own security at times, so can try and stop this and try and catch the perpetrators for this. We have a very good working relationship with Sainsbury's because of where we're situated, and can often respond to calls there and arrest people. So we will respond when we can.
I mean, in a previous life, I was a Tesco superstore manager. So I know the issues and challenges that shoplifting brings, not only to the staff and residents of an area, and the antisocial behaviour that it can also bring. So I think the reassurance of seeing officers is really important to those employees, staff and residents that use those stores. So you put the increase down predominantly to the cost of living.
Yeah, the cost of living, those that are trying to fuel other habits, because they will then sell products to people that don't have the money to go out and buy them themselves, or if they can get something much cheaper, then there will be a market for it.
Cool, thank you.
Particularly around, meats. That's an area where it really will flourish.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, hello again. Can I just press you a little bit further on the topic of speeding? So the bit of my question was around different categories of motoring offence. Have you got any insight into kind of the trend locally for things such as, for example, I don't know, careless driving, inconsiderate driving, whatever it may be? What percentage of, for example, of speeding offences are serious enough to end up in court? Things like that. Just a general trend, really, to kind of highlight the sort of standard of driving on our roads. And just one more as well, if I may, Chair, while I'm here. The piece that you talked us through this evening contained obviously quite a fair bit about violence against women and girls, which I absolutely agree needs to be a priority. In terms of recording violence offences, is that data split in terms of gender? So can we see the data for various categories of violence against women and girls, or is it just covered under the offence type?
So do you want me to address that point first? Because that's more of my area of business. So there are opportunities for us to look. You can collect that data. So the victim codes like ethnicities, sex are always recorded. So we can get that data. If it's something that you'd want produced in a report, then we can prepare that. Can look at the numbers. Same with driving offences as well. We can capture that detail. We can capture those disposal options, or whether they were dealt with by ticket, or whether they went through to court because of for the offending. So we can capture that data. That will all be recorded, which hopefully give you that reassurance. Same with the speeding offences. Those officers that complete those forms, it's all recorded. And so there is ways of capturing that. So if we can look and identify particular areas of concern, then we can obviously then carry out enforcement operations.
I've got a couple of questions, if I may. You mentioned about moving people out of houses where there is antisocial behaviour. Does that just displace the problem somewhere else? Where do those people actually go? If you could give us a bit more information about how that works in practice. Thank you.
In an ideal world outside West Berkshire? No, we just move the problem. But it gives us the opportunity of being able to monitor where they are more effectively, because if they're kind of staying, if you've got quite a group of just thinking like brothers that are staying with parents in one house or mum in one house, but she can't manage their behaviour, then we can look at excluding them from those premises, sending them to live with another family member that would just have a bit more care, or can offer a bit more support to try and then disrupt their behaviour. And also, if you move them out of the area, away from their friends and associates, it does limit their opportunities of travelling back in, because quite often they don't have vehicles. It just makes life a bit more difficult for them to then commit their crime. So it is quite successful.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And you mentioned about a young child who died in the weir near Victoria Park. I believe somebody else passed away there recently as well and fell in, I think it's the weir area. You'll know more about the details than myself.
Yeah, that was an adult.
Right.
And so there were no suspicious circumstances. But
Okay.
obviously, it was unexplained. And we do, most of the deaths that we do have in the canal there are, the accidents that have happened, or people that are intoxicated and that have fallen in. And just, unfortunately, it's amazing how when Dylan died, we obviously were out there conducting a full search, and the flow of the water was so fast that day, it kind of took you by surprise, really. You wouldn't expect, you always think of a canal as fairly slow moving, but actually it is quite powerful there. And if someone does go under, trying to get out, even if you're a strong swimmer, is quite challenging.
I just wonder if there's any further action that we need to take there, or whether it's just a case of, you mentioned about the intoxication. Obviously, there's not a lot we can do about that, but is there something that we can do to make that particular area safer?
So the Water Safety Partnership has done that. They've put up signs. There are barriers where you go and feed the ducks there in just Victoria Park to try and create a bit of safety. And so hopefully they are working to do that. But it's such a big area. But so to try and identify those spots where people congregate and go, particularly young children, that's what we've done to try and keep safe, to try and campaign.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Oh, all done? Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. You are free to leave now. And you can welcome to stay if you like, but you don't have to. Okay. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you very much for your questions, colleagues. So we now move on to item 7, Revenue Financial Performance Report for Q1 2023-2024. This report will be considered by Executive on the 21st of September, and I'd like to invite Joseph Holmes to present the Revenue Financial Performance Report for us. Thank you for joining us.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. So, yes, as you say, this report is heading off to Executive next week and has been released in those papers. I'll just give a quick highlight as to the Q1 revenue financial performance report. So as you can see in here, there's a really significant overspend forecast, certainly the largest that I can remember here at Q1, driven mainly by pressures in the People Directorate and especially in Children's Services. So some quite significant increases in demand coming through there, impacting on 3 areas really as a whole. So placement budgets, where we are placing children in care, additional agency costs, where we are having an increase in numbers and therefore have an increasing staffing requirement, and then actually trying to recruit permanent staff as well. So as soon as we have agency staff, as this committee has looked at last year, it is far more expensive. And then because of those additional numbers coming through, then additional legal costs through the joint legal team as well. And those are 3 main areas there in Children and Family Services, and that represents kind of well over half of the forecast overspend. You can see I make comment in there around some of the measures that we are putting in place. So since earlier in the summer, we have put in place a financial review panel to look at all expenditure over £1,000 for services which are overspending, as well as looking at all agency and recruitment activity. as important measures to try to reduce the overspend position as we travel through the rest of the financial year. But certainly a concerning Q1 position, and one that we are taking very seriously.
Thank you very much for that summary, Mr. Holmes. Do members have questions, please? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the question. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Just one to start with. Section 4.1 says, and the second part of the section, there are other financial pressures in the planning services, which is unachieved income and delayed additional planning income changes via government changes. Can you explain or kind of tell us like what kind of government changes has necessitated this or caused this?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. And this is in respect, and actually, if you go to the Local Government Association website, they've been highlighting this only this week, that the subsidy to the taxpayer nationally is about £5 million through not increasing planning fees, as was set out in, I think it's the sort of the levelling up and regeneration bill that's heading through Parliament at present. When we set the budget, we're expecting that those fee increases would be allowed to come in much earlier in the financial year. It has faced delays in going through Parliament, so therefore we have not we've not seen that increased level of income. I think in the longer term, we would expect to, if you assumed all sort of, the level of planning applications remain the same, we do expect that to come through once the bill has been approved. But until that date, that is causing us a linear financial pressure.
Sorry, so yeah, thanks, Mr. Holmes. So you're suggesting that the budgeted one for the additional increase in the planning applications charges has not come to us, and this has resulted in this. Yeah. So effectively, this is kind of like not for this council to deal with, in terms of this is effectively a central government position that they've not increased charges in time, and effectively putting pressure on the councils across the country and us, including us, isn't it?
Yes. So we don't determine those. So through Chair, that we don't determine those. So those who come through from central government. So I can just read from what the LGA says. But for example, it says planning fees currently do not cover the true cost of processing planning applications, with 305 out of 343 local authority planning departments operating in a deficit totaling just under £250 million in 2021.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that stage. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, if I may. I think just one point that I'd make on page 51, where it talks about environmental impact, and it says it's unlikely to have a long-term environmental impact. I'm very aware that there are pressures in the environment team and the environment portfolio holders quite concerned about having enough funds long-term for our net zero ambitions. So I just wonder whether we ought to say something a little bit more there in the environmental impact section, perhaps. And also we talk about selling assets. That's mentioned in the paper. I was just wondering, Mr. Holmes, if you could give us a bit more information about what kind of assets we might be thinking of selling. I'll just ask that initially. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So on the environmental impact point of view, I think in the short term, specifically for this paper, I don't think there would be a huge impact. Your point around wider funds for achieving net zero ambitions for the council, that is probably more of a question for budget setting purposes when we sort of get there on the 29th of February, or as papers come in here beforehand. So I think perhaps specifically for this paper, probably not a huge impact, more of a long-term one to consider, where there might be potential ramifications from our current position. On the assets review, so we'll be reviewing all of our assets and those ones which we could realise sooner would be those either those sort of assets which we are not utilising anymore, or those commercial property assets as well. So we will be investigating what opportunities there are for sales around those areas. And if we do suggest anything, that will then come back through to executive for approval. So it has to have executive approval.
And just a supplementary to that, is it the case that we're considering selling any of our care homes?
That is not in the list of things that we're looking at to sell for this.
Thank you. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. It's clear that thank you very much. It's clear that and you mentioned that the agency fees are causing a considerable pressure on the budgets. Earlier in the year, People Directorate brought forward a recruitment and retention programme, which we had high hopes for. Could perhaps you or perhaps Mr. Coe just mention about how that's proceeding?
Yeah, I can start on that. I'm sure Mr. Coe will chip it after each chair. So yes, yeah, absolutely. That was part of the budget proposals, and that has been enacted. And I think now, as we get more into the financial year, we're starting to see an increase in the number of permanent staff and a decrease through agency staff. So I suppose just to give the committee an idea of sort of the numbers that we're talking about on the agency side of things. So through our main agencies provider, which is sort of Commensura, who sort of, as this committee has seen, provides our overall agency contract. Before the financial review panel was in place, the monthly spend was approximately £750,000. In the last 4 weeks, that's gone down to about £570,000. So we are starting to see quite a significant drop off in agency. That will help our overall position, certainly into the longer term. As to the number of permanent staff that we're getting, Mr. Coe's coming in in a second, we have seen some permanent recruitment come through, and that has been positive. It's been highlighted in some of the trade press around sort of children services, the benefits of kind of working at West Berkshire comparatively. However, continuing to retain children's social workers is difficult because of that current climate. But I'll let Mr. Coe come in.
I wouldn't add an awful lot more other than to say it has had a positive effect. I'm sure it has. It hasn't been a radical transformation in the way that we might have hoped. It's a step in the right direction, but there is yet more work to be done, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks very much, Chairman. When you mentioned selling assets, I was just wondering if it was a certain filling station that you might have had your eye on.
No.
For that. But no, my question was looking at the principal single source of this overspend, which is children's and family services. And you mentioned placements, agency costs and legal costs. Now, with placements and legal costs, there's very little you can do with those. I mean, we've got a statutory responsibility to children and young people in our care, which kind of leaves agency. And Dominic sort of almost stole my question, but what I was going to ask was, it's good to hear that we're having some success with converting some agency staff to permanent. Do you have any idea what factors are helping towards that, so we can kind of learn lessons and sort of spread the best practice?
Yeah, so I think in that we've not specifically in children's social care, but certainly some in children's and adult social care, we've seen about we expect to have about 26 agency to permanent staff switch over in the last 4 months. I think the main factor is we have in HR, there was a specific transformation bid around having a sort of talent attraction post a few months ago, and that has been really beneficial on focusing on some of the offer that the council has, doing some really targeted work with social care colleagues on trying to sort of directly recruit people in. So I think that has certainly been one of the key benefits coming through to help support that position.
I'd like to add something, Mr. Coe.
Thank you. I take Councillor McKinnon's point in terms of once you've identified a need, you've got to meet that need, and placements are obviously one of the ways that we do that. But one of the things that we are doing, which I think is really important, is seeking to grow our fostering offer fostering and adoption offer, because we know that residential care home placements can be extremely expensive, can often not be the best outcome. They do meet the required, the need that we've identified, but we think that there are more cost-efficient ways to meet those needs than the placements, particularly because the national market is in such dire straits. So we're trying to grow our fostering and adoption offer, and we commend it as a cost-efficient and a way to have better outcomes for children as well.
Thanks, gents, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Pemberton and then Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Holmes. Can I ask, prior to the financial review panel being in place, what percentage of agency workers were procured, if you like, outside of what we might call the compliant commensurate process? What was the reason for that?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So it varies, and this committee's had some information before around this. So our spend in the last financial year was just below £12 million on agency staff, and just under £10 million of that was through the commensurate contract. So it fluctuates around the sort of 70% plus level through our main commensurate contract. There are a variety of reasons. Sometimes through that main contract, they're very specialist posts, and it is difficult to service some of those. Certainly during sort of the pandemic, there was just a need just to get staff in really quickly, because there would be a sort of government view. This, you've got to go and do this. And even since then, we've still had some policy changes from government which we needed to respond to really quickly, which we just need to do in the fastest way. For example, getting some of the energy bills funding out there. However, that is an absolutely key part of the financial review panel. Certainly the portfolio holder is very keen on ensuring that we have all staff coming through commensurate who are agency, and that is a very important strand for us, and something that we are seeing much greater percentages coming through. So I would expect when I come back here for quarter 2, quarter 3 to see an even higher absolute percentage come through the main contract.
Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Holmes, for your kind of introduction to the report. A couple of questions really from me. In the revenue report, it mentions inflationary pressures, but it doesn't give a figure for the kind of expected inflation for that budget, but it does in the capital. I think in capital it gave an expected inflation of 2%. But in the revenue, it doesn't mention an inflationary number used. Can you remember what was used to help generate this budget?
Through Chair. So yeah, thanks, Councillor. And it depends. So apologies for giving that answer. But it does. So for example, our waste contract is linked to the RPIX inflation figure as at January. That was 14.2%. Whereas other non-contractual spend, we have a greater control over. So, for example, in adult social care, that inflationary figure was just below 3%, and it all depends on when that service comes through. For a large amount of some of our placement costs, for instance, those inflation figures can be up around the 10% figure, if not slightly higher. Some of the asks are. So it does depend service by service what's kind of sitting behind there. Some of our we've seen nationally with energy inflation, for example, has risen very significantly. So in the previous year, that is certainly starting to come down. Other of our contracts will just tied into a RPI or mainly CPI figure at a point in time. So yeah, it does depend service by service what that is. So that varies across the piece, as well as the staff pay award as well. That still hasn't been determined yet, that we are hopeful that will be determined in the coming couple of months.
Thank you. My second kind of follow-on question from that, if that's okay, just quickly, relating to the paragraph 5.2, it says that inflationary pressures were identified in demand-led services, but not all pressures were built into the budget. Do you mind me asking, what those pressures were and why weren't they built into the budget?
Yes, so again, through you, Chair. So that's mainly around adult social care. So we have the adult social care model, which is further in this paper. It's included in the full council budget papers as well. And there's a very wide assessment around there of what a best and what worst case scenario is. And the budget was set just below the base case, so just below the middle case, because we were expecting the inflation was going to start running, certainly based on, again, in the budget papers on the Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts, that inflation will be at a lower level than it is now. So we're thinking actually it's perhaps be on the slightly optimistic side of the base case, but there's quite a wide range between best and worst case within that. And inflation is coming down, but it is looking unlikely that it will come down as quickly as Bank of England and Office of Budget Responsibility was forecasting when we're setting the budget.
That was probably quite optimistic, I would say. Do you mind me asking how and who was involved in coming to that decision to pitch for that scenario?
Yeah, so that's a sort of discussion with the administration at the time around how we get to that figure and why.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gawley. I saw Councillor Pattenden and then Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks very much, Chair. So some pretty drastic measures were taken a couple of months ago. What would have happened had those actions not been taken? And when would they have started to manifest themselves?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair, Councillor, for that. If we hadn't have taken those measures as quickly as we had, the overspend forecast would likely, and certainly whatever comes out at Q2 at the end of this month, would likely be higher, because we wouldn't have put in place that additional scrutiny. And yes, it is additional bureaucracy, but that bureaucracy for a good reason. It's quite hard to quantify exactly what that figure will be. When I come back at Q2, certainly around agency spend, absolutely can quantify around what some of the difference in cost has been month on month. I can certainly say it would be very likely that we would have a higher overspend if those measures hadn't been put in place. What this is about is trying to change behaviours in the short term, and to an extent these measures do have to be in the short term, to try and prioritise that essential spending and protecting our most vulnerable. So there would have been a shift. I'll be able to report certainly around some of the agency cost at further quarters.
But doesn't it really indicate that the budgeting process, and you've got to bring it into question? Is it really fit for purpose? Is the modelling fit for purpose? Because the 7 million overspend could have sunk this council, couldn't it?
Yes, I mean this level of overspend is eating into nearly all of our general fund reserve, so it is a really significant position that we face. From the budgeting side of things, just to give members an idea, in children's social care of growth. Towards the start of the last financial year, the number of children in care was 166. By June this year, it was 209. And some of those placements where we are placing children can be into the certainly in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So there has been a significant increase, certainly beyond when we set the budget, and the same on children with educational health care plans as well, which then drives a number of the increased costs in some of the education service that you are seeing come through there. So ideally we would have absolutely loads of reserves, and we could cushion this very simply. The council has historically always run on a comparatively low level of reserves when you have a look at some of that DLUC information. So we have always run quite a sort of tight financial control here. The levels of demand increase that we're having, combined with inflationary pressures, combined with the difficulty of recruiting permanent staff in some of those sort of core care sectors that we have, it is kind of a perfect storm of financial pressures that we're facing alongside. I mean, I've named some other councils in there who are reporting significant pressures. You can just Google council finances and you'll have page after page of councils across the country facing a not dissimilar position to us.
But this is what the modelling is supposed to bring out, isn't it? That there could be that the number of children requiring EHCPs might go from 150 to 250. That's what the modelling is for. I think, and those numbers have been going up, for the last few years as well. So these are, it's a debate I know we've had in the past about the effectiveness of the modelling, and really what this highlights to me is that it's not, it's not reliable enough, and we need to find a better way of doing it.
Yeah, back to you, Chair. To an extent, the model is a model. So is the estimate as to the information that we have as at the time that we set the budget. Certainly, adult social care, there is a best and a worst case, and similarly in children social care, we did not expect demand to increase because the level of demand in children's services that we've got is at a historical high. So if you go back to what the model will based on those longer term trends, those numbers are far lower than we've got at the moment. So,
okay, final comment, if I can. What we need to be looking at is how we put preventative measures in place in order that we don't see these sort of rises taking place. And that hasn't happened for a long time here. It needs to start happening now urgently. That's my final.
Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just you're coming back on what Councillor Pattington and Gourley were saying there. The points that Councillor Pattington raises, it reminds me a lot of conversations I've had with Councillor Brooks all the time over the last 4 years about what a model is and what it isn't. And Mr. Holmes is quite correct. The model is an estimate, it's a forecast of what's going to happen. With the best will in the world, that forecast is never going to be accurate. And it was that can be what happens. I mean, you had 166 placements going up by 43 to 209. That's an unprecedented volatility. Well, it might do, or it might go down by 50. You don't know. And the model is a flawed tool, but it's the best one that you've got. A model, if you can predict the future perfectly, I want your lottery numbers. And with Councillor Gourley's point, asking for who was responsible for the decisions back then about inflation. Call me cynical, but I think I can see where you're going with that. And I think during the budgetary process, when you're looking at inflation forecasts and interest rate forecasts, you can only go on what the Bank of England are telling you, and you can only go on what the OBR are telling you. And I'm sure that we would have heard holy hell if we had departed from those forecasts. But none of it's secret. Mr. Holmes has explained what the inflation assumptions were. Those weren't secret at the budget either. They were in there. And as I remember, there were no amendments brought to the budget back in March. And there was every opportunity for opposition parties to do so. And there were none. Instead, we were promised an emergency budget if the Liberals... That is true. Councillor Abbs explicitly said there would be an emergency budget, Councillor Pattington, but please tell me why I'm wrong, if that's what you think.
He didn't say that there would be. He said it would be considered.
No, I'm afraid not. Let's not do this now,
Okay,
Councillor Pattington. And if I can just draw my comments to a close, please, Councillor Culver. None of this is secret. So if there's ever an attempt made to say, well, now we've opened the books, now we've discovered this, the books are always open. This is local government. This isn't Wall Street mergers and acquisitions. But I'll thank you for that, Chairman, and I'll leave my comments there.
Okay, I've seen Councillor Cottingham. Thank you for joining us. I believe you're on holiday at the moment, so it's very dedicated of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few points I just want to pick up on. So first of all, the financial review panel. As someone who is a newbie to local government, but not to finance, I've had over 30 years in financial control. I must admit, I found it quite an insight into the process and also really what local government do. So over 700 services. So from my perspective, it's sort of bringing extra scrutiny, extra oversight into the process of spending public money. And I think, as I say, we've acted very, very quickly once we knew that there was going to be a projected overspend. So, as I say, every Thursday morning, we spend 2 to 3 hours going through line by line of expenditure. As being picked up, we have reduced the number of agency workers significantly. I think the latest figures have gone down from 178 to 154, which we've been given. So the process is working. We have had 1 or 2 issues regarding spend coming out the woodwork, regarding invoices being 2 or 3 years old, spend without purchase orders. So what we're trying to do is to bring extra financial discipline to, I suppose, as we said, the business of West Berkshire. With regarding the forecast model, yes, it was a forecast done back in January time. And yes, things have increased significantly. And the question could be whether or not through the budget process, an extra level of sensitivity analysis could have been done regarding what if children's services went up by 25%, which I believe they've gone up by at least 20% in care. So that may be something which we can look at with regarding the next budgetary cycle setting process in for 23-24, but also bringing on board our new auditors to look at the going concern of the council, because we obviously we're working very, very hard to make sure we hit the zero overspend, which these actions which we described earlier hopefully will bring to the business of West Berkshire. However, obviously the challenges are still going to be into the pipeline the year after 23-24 and 24-25 as well. So I think there's still lots to be done. There's lots to be understanding what's driving these increased costs, especially in children's services. And I agree with the comment made previously regarding early help office. We have 3 times less number of officers in West Berkshire compared to Bracknell and Wokingham, and it's deemed to be a success in those neighbouring authorities to reduce the number of children coming into care. So that is definitely something which we'll be looking at to invest to increase, as I say, to prevent children coming into care in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. I've just got a couple of questions, if I may, and then I'll bring other members back in again. We talk about stopping recruitment where possible. I know you've got the new panel now to look at which jobs we recruit to and which we don't. Can I just clarify that would apply to all levels of staff within the council from top to bottom? I think we've touched upon the suppression of market demand for children in care and so on, so I won't labour on that question, which I was going to ask. I would be quite interested to know about recruitment in other local authorities, because anecdotally I'm aware that in planning, for example, we compete with the private sector because you can earn more if you go into the private sector. But I'm also conscious that we're a relatively small unitary. And I just wonder if officers could comment on whether we are struggling to attract people because of that, and maybe people are going to other authorities where they can earn more.
Okay, so just on the points around, all recruitment requests come through to the panel across the council. So we're request to go out to external recruit, and it is not a de facto blanket freeze. You see on our website at the moment a range of posts that's still out there, and of course, if we have an agency member of staff in post, we'd much rather have a permanent member of staff for a whole variety of reasons. As to staff leaving for more money, yes, some staff will leave for more money in other authorities. Similarly, we sometimes recruit staff because we might pay more than somewhere else. And I think in a working environment where there's greater hybrid working, then that opens up, both opportunities and difficulties for us as a council, alongside many other councils in the southeast, and more widely across local authority. So I think there's Chair, I think there's some ups and downs in there. I think the position you make, the point you make, staff will always potentially even always have done for a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes it can be pay, sometimes various others that I know Personnel Committee look at. So that remains the base. I don't think it has got any more so at present. That is why people would potentially leave.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Bowick and then Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. A question to Councillor Cottingham. When he mentioned that the number of the agency numbers had gone down from 178 to 154. Was that in children's or is that across the board?
That is the latest number which we've been given by our commensurates. So when we're monitoring these figures on a weekly basis in the financial review panel, so I believe that to be all agency staff with our preferred partner. And I think that number was to the end of August. So we might have, sorry, apologies, I didn't attend today's meeting. So there might be a more up-to-date number, which Joseph might be out, which Mr. Holmes might be able to provide to you.
To be honest, I'm not like interested in the absolute number. What I want to know is, will this reduction in agency social workers have any effect on children's social workers' caseloads? That's a really important point that I want to have, that I want an answer to. And if you can't give me that, perhaps Mr. Coe can.
So the number quoted, it was not specific to either the children and family services or indeed social work, the social work cohort. That's an across the board piece. And as we said before, a really big part of that has been trying to make an offer to agency workers to say, come and work for us permanently. We can put a package together that's attractive. We've had some success on that. So no, I totally take your point, Councillor Burke. It is not okay to simply reduce the number of agency workers and give them more cases. That's not what's going on here. No, this is a whole number of activities. Principally, it's about trying to, successfully increasing permanent recruitment and also rationalising across the board where are the posts where actually we could do with a gap, but children's social workers are not where that activity is going on. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a further question. Very unnerved by Councillor Cottingham talking about preventing children being taken into care. That's a very unfortunate phrase to use. Children are only taken into care when they absolutely need to be, when they're not safe in the environment they're in. We will assume the responsibility and take children into care. We know perfectly well why the number has gone up. It's quite clear. Won't rehearse that now. We all heard about it in chamber in the executive time after time. But you're absolutely right when you point out that that we're an outlier when we compare with Bracknell, Wokingham, and so on. And I know that officers have done an enormous amount of work to try and understand that anomaly. I'm not close enough any longer to know how that's proceeding, but I'd be interested to hear from Mr. Coe whether we've been able to get underneath that yet.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe the point that was Councillor Cottingham was seeking to make was that there are times when an early intervention, preventative support can avoid families getting to the point where parents are unable to cope or where children are unsafe. So it's about timely, proactive interventions to avoid a crisis. It is, and the point that was made was that we know that there are other authorities where the early help offer is a broader, more robust, better resourced provision. We have not moved hugely. I think it's fair to say it's been slow for us to move because ultimately there's a question here about how to invest, particularly in a difficult set of circumstances. How can we meaningfully invest in that early help offer? We've also been waiting somewhat on some expert external advice. We've now got that advice. There is no smoking gun. There is no simple answer to this question. I think what we're hearing from our external advisors is a lot of small changes should hopefully give us the kind of outcomes that we're looking for children. But certainly the growth of the early help offer is probably a really critical way of avoiding those crises that we know escalate the needs of children and put them outside of family networks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you. The obviously the 6.3 million deficit we're looking at is to the end of the year. Forgive me if I've missed it, but are there any figures for actual Q1?
Thank you through you, Chair. Councillor, if we could just go to, I think it's right in the appendix at the back. You have to zoom in a little bit. So it has some of those sort of forecasts there in there. Well, certainly gives you more detail on some of the forecasts. The actual the whole way we do it is trying to forecast though to the end of the financial year. So that is the basis.
Okay. And one other question is, we've always been very proud of having our own care homes, but has anything been done to look at whether it's the most economic way of the council to providing services to our residents?
Yes, we recently held a strategy board with members to articulate the arguments for and against running our in-house services. So more work yet to be done, but yes, it's an active conversation about both in terms of what's the benefit to the people that we support, what are the costs to the council, and obviously to the community.
That's work in progress.
Work in progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reid, and then I've got some more questions myself.
It's a question to Mr. Holmes. It's not so much about modelling, it's more the fact that we live in a geopolitical situation that no one can guess, and economists certainly don't have that perfect crystal ball. So in financial services, you're probably aware that reports like TC 2.4, ILAP, ICAP, and all that needs to be put forward, which is kind of going to say this is when we're going to break against various scenarios. Are the LGA and government moving towards to say that councils should possibly start looking at those kind of scenario plays to say what happens if, for example, Birmingham happens to us for an equal pay request, or similar things that may be well out of our control, or historical things that may come and catch us?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. So on that, so you see, I put a bit of text kind of around that in the paper, in some of the supporting information in paragraphs 5, around some of the next steps if we were to end up with an outturn that would be above our level of general fund reserve. So general fund reserve £7.2 million. And if the outturn was above that, we would look probably at seeking a capitalisation directive from the government. The position, for example, Birmingham are in is where they have issued a Section 114 notice, and so that is stopping all bar non-essential spend, and a much greater level of focus. Woking have issued one, as have Slough, Thurrock, Croydon, and some other councils as well. Something was pretty unheard of in local government up until the last few years. I think, as I say in here, the steps before that would be that we would, if we had to, we'd seek a capitalisation directive. And again, a number of councils a couple of years ago had those approved. Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole have just had one recently approved as well, following a best value inspection. We would also then, ideally, we would not come to either of those positions, and we would, have a much lower level of overspend, if not a break even. Break even is going to be difficult. I'm not going to sort of shy away from that in this committee from this position. That is going to be difficult. But firstly, we want to make sure that that forecast overspend is far lower. But those are kind of the mechanisms that are in place. And actually, government only recently over the summer consulted on their sort of proposals for exactly what you were saying. Kind of, they were looking at consulting on their best value proposals around. These are the next steps for councils to consider.
I'd like to have a supplementary. So. Just taking it a bit further, and the fact, unfortunately, unemployment figures are slowly going back up, hoping it's a blip. That means comes down, but obviously it could put pressure on people and our income. In fact, that they would struggle to pay for their council tax. Have we done anything around that?
Again, so just respond to you, Chair. Actually, our council tax and business rates collection is holding up well, actually, especially business rates. So yes, I mean, we monitor that every single month and all of the time. It just gets formally reported every single month. At the moment, they're still holding up pretty well compared to pre-COVID times, and certainly the last couple of years. So we're not seeing a huge pressure there at the moment. Of course, you're quite right. That is something to keep a really close eye on. We discussed that as part of the budget setting process as well, what we think might happen around levels of collection and the collection rate. But at the moment, that is holding up quite well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've got a couple more questions. It says in the report somewhere, forgive me, I haven't made a note of which paragraph, about overtime and staff needing to ask for permission before they go ahead and do extra work and claim for overtime. But I'm just wondering, in a situation where you've got an emergency relating to adult social care or children, for example, obviously the officer is not going to say it's 5 o'clock, I'm going home, but how would one deal with that practically?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So yes, we do have some exemptions in there. So as a financial review panel, we look at that. So for example, care homes and immediate agency requests, there is an exemption in there. And similarly around overtime, we have some exemptions in there as well. So at the start of the process, we sort of said to Mr. Coe and sort of fellow executive directors, if there's some sort of obvious exemptions that you require precisely for the reasons you articulate, please get those in to begin with so that we're not going through that process all of the time.
Okay, so for staff in this building, for example, is there a policy of time off in lieu? So if someone ends up doing a lot of evenings and so on, they would get time off in lieu. I'm just conscious that if we have got staff vacancies, it's likely that existing staff will have to take on extra work and perhaps do much longer hours than they're contracted. And we obviously don't want to be in a situation in the long term where we're expecting people to do a lot of hours and they're not effectively being paid.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Chair, we actively look at that at the financial review panel. So where requests come through like that, we have a look at what other options we have, and absolutely want to ensure that staff stick to the time that they are due to work. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. And then a second question from me, if I may. My understanding is that home to school transport costs quite a lot of money. Is there anything more that we can do to reduce that cost in the long term? Yes, so thank you, Chair. On that one, so just a couple of points. So just around increase in pressures around children with education, health and care plans, which often leads to increase in home to school transport. That's gone up by 15% in the last year up until the middle of this summer. So we've commissioned a home to school transport review. I haven't read the paper yet. We're just considering it with colleagues at the moment around what options we've got that could deliver further savings there. So yeah, absolutely, that is quite a significant chunk of spend, about £4 million that we are investigating.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Any other questions, colleagues? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Cottingham and Councillor Pemberton, Councillor Pattenden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on your point on the overtime. Yes, we've been monitoring it just to ensure that we are complying with appropriate health and safety. So we don't want people doing excessive hours, which could have a detrimental impact on their own health. So we're well aware of our responsibilities, and we've had one or two come in, which did seem to be a bit excessive in the number of hours that they were doing. So we're trying to, as I say, by using that process to ensure that we are complying with being a good employer from a health and safety perspective and their well-being.
Thank you, councillor Cottingham. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Holmes, capital directives and funding from government. Can you just sort of talk us through what that looks like in terms of general terms and conditions, funding costs, etc.?
Absolutely, yeah, through you, Chair. So thanks, Councillor. So yes, where those authorities have applied for a capitalisation directive, what would happen is some initial questions are asked, pretty straightforward about benchmarking costs, last time that our accounts were audited, the level of reserves, where the pressures are coming from, etc., etc. And then the process would be that the minister, if they're minded to, would then issue a sort of a minded to capitalisation directive of X million pounds, and then the council would be subject to a review through the Department for Housing and Levelling Up. And then once that review was received, and assuming that review was reasonable and they said, okay, that looks fine, then the formal capitalisation directive would be issued. So that, say it was £1 million, £1 million would be formally provided and approved. And then the council would need to repay the government. Now, that can either be through additional capital receipts, or it could be, or the borrowing costs are above the rate that we can borrow at the moment from the government through the Public Works Loan Board. So there would be an additional charge likely on top of that. I don't know the exact amount, but that would be, I mean, capital receipts is generally generating capital receipts, generally where councils have gone to try and repay that amount as quickly as they can.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Regarding the financial review process that's now being undertaken, I'm wondering what has been has come out of that as far as financial internal controls are concerned. Whether there's things that lessons have been learned, or things that can be used going forward.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor, for that. I think, as Councillor Cottingham alluded to earlier, absolutely come through has been a reinforcement of no purchase order, no payment rules, and we've written out to suppliers along those lines as well to make sure we capture that from both sides. I will say most of the expenditure requests which come through have their business case attached and are approved. It highlights the range of different council spending areas that we do have, but we do not approve some of them, and we do request further information where things haven't been completed or we require that. So I think as we've gone through this process now over the last couple of months, people are getting more used to the requirement and the level of evidence that they're expected to put into those bids that come through.
So you're implying that things weren't as robust as they could have been in the past, is that right?
We didn't have this process in place before, so people were not having to put in business cases for spending over £1,000 before. So to that extent, there's nothing to compare it to. From that point of view, from the additional spend.
Okay, thank you. I can see Councillor Cottingham's hand again. Is that a new point, Councillor Cottingham, or legacy hand?
I'm just picking up on what Mr. Holmes is saying regarding the level of internal control, and also Councillor Patterson's question. I think, yes, it's fair to say that the standard of completed documentation has been steadily improving over the last couple of months. And I think, as you said, it's been a bit of a journey for the panel, but also for people submitting bids to have money spent. We've had people below £1,000 submitting, so being a little bit too risk averse. So it is a process which is evolving. I do foresee it potentially becoming business as usual. As Mr. Holmes said, the financial pressures are still going to be with us till the end of the year, until we see what the true result of the financial year is. But I think it is bringing that degree of awareness that money is tight, and the fact that it has to be approved before you then commit, whereas for certain areas, for whatever reason, especially I think we've had a tendency occasionally of agency staff spending money without POs, which again, we're reinforcing it through the relevant officers that we have a zero tolerance to this, and it's slow. I think it's now working its way through the organisation. And what I would say is that the financial review panel, we've had really good commitment from the attendees and the officers who are leading the individual areas of West Berkshire to making sure it does work and we have compliance with the rules and regulations which we're putting in place. So it's a journey, and we're working our way through it. So yes, there is room for improvement, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this paper, members? I think we've had quite an interesting discussion about this. So this is just for noting. We don't need to have a vote on this. So we can move on now to the capital paper. Again, this is going to be considered by executive on the 21st of September. So I invite Mr. Holmes to present this to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is on the sort of capital side of things. So it mainly is looking at where we are spending against some of our projects included in the budget. As ever, there is often quite a bit of reprofiling that is articulated within the paper and some of the appendices here. I suppose one thing to really note is the cost of capital financing has certainly risen significantly over the last couple of years, and indeed actually only in the last couple of weeks has bounced back up again. We borrow at around about 0.8 to 1% above the prevailing UK sort of gilt markets, and that started to nudge up again actually in the last few weeks. And indeed, it's kind of what you spend in the current year determines a lot of the financial cost for the next year. So there is an interplay here with where spend takes place and then what happens into future financial years.
Thank you very much. Questions, colleagues? No. Councillor Amatharaj.
Certainly, maybe this, revenue capital. I just want, normally in my world, I just like to get a hold of a whole load of it and just spend it. But borrowing to income ratio, where roughly council-wise, where are we? Where does that put us with, similar organisations? Where are we?
Yes, so you can go to the, which one I'll just go now to give you the exact figure, but you can go to the OFLOG, so that's the Office of Local Government, which has recently been set up by DLUC, which has sort of the answers to your question. So if you look, which I think sort of question around sort of borrowing around debt as a percentage of our core spending power, we are I can't tell exactly on quartiles on this, but we are somewhere between probably like the higher end of the lowest quartile and the bottom end of the third sort of quartile. So quite a bit below average our level of debt that we've undertaken over a number of years as a percentage of our core spending power. Some of the authorities towards the top end are those which have been in the national press, Slough, Thurrock, Thurrock or Warrington, for example. So yeah, that OFLOG information is all public information and quite helpful for some of that budget setting point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This time, Mr. Holmes, in section 7.8, it says the council is currently in an overborrowed position. I just want to make it simple why we are in an overborrowed situation, and considering the interest rates forecast, is it?
Yeah, so thank you through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So if you look at the sort of graph on page 88 of the pack, you can see, so in essence, in essence, actually what's happened is, so we've not undertaken, apart from our sort of community bond, we've not undertaken any borrowing over the last 4 years. And that's because previously the council would look at, this is the capital programme for the year ahead, say it's £20 million that require borrowing, and then during the year the council would go out to borrow that £20 million. However, a number of schemes, like many other councils, for a variety of reasons, there are delays in those schemes. So that aligned with that during COVID, we had much higher cash balances because we were given a lot of grants to distribute out to businesses and residents, kept our cash balances really high. So it prevented that need from borrowing. So in a perfect world, we would not in effect be over borrowed because all those schemes would have been delivered exactly on time. But as you can see from the chart, we've not undertaken any additional borrowing in the last 4 years. And the longer we can delay that long-term borrowing, the better, because the rates we're borrowing at the moment are substantially higher than they have been recently.
Thank you, Mr.
Again to Mr. Holmes. So, not that I know much about local government borrowing again, but how much of that is actually exposed to shocks to the UK PLC financial system, deciding on, we don't know which administration is going to be coming along and making decisions, or things that might be happening in Eastern Europe and our commitments there?
So thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So those borrowing rates are fixed. So all the borrowing we've undertaken mainly is on an annuity basis, but we are tied into fixed rates as at that date. So clearly that borrowing pre-2019 was at relatively low levels. So we undertake some short-term borrowing from time to time, just purely for a cash flow basis, which will generally be less than a year. You can see from that chart, and it's something that's probably more actually for the committee's consideration as we get through to looking at some of those budget setting papers, is that strategy into the future where we expect, again, we're back to forecast here, but we expect in the longer term interest rates to drop down slightly. It's the challenge of not wanting to tie ourselves in now to long-term, what we expect to be higher rate levels of borrowing, against them being totally exposed. And there are some councils who have just borrowed short-term all of the time, to being totally exposed to what's happening in the short-term markets. So it's I think you see from that chart, we're certainly in the future will expose ourselves more to some short-term interest rate changes, but I think in an environment where we think interest rates in the long term are going to go down, I think that would be the right strategy. But that's something that actually the committee want to consider as those papers come through for the budget setting purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So just to clarify, when it comes to reprofiling, this is when departments request that their figures are pushed forward a bit. They still want to do the project, but in future years. So in many places in the report, it talks about no reprofiling having been requested. Is there a date by which departments need to request that reprofiling so that they don't lose that budget long term?
A good question, Chair. One of the reasons actually we've got the capital strategy now to a 10-year period. So the council used to have a capital strategy over a 3-year period, but we moved it to 10 years now because for a whole variety of reasons, projects might be delayed, or it might seem, actually we should redo that in year 3 because we know something else is locally has happened. Right, okay, we want to sort that out first. And so we're trying to put greater flexibility into the capital programme. So to get away from the behaviour that you've kind of articulated, let's get everything into year 1. It looks like we have a higher borrowing need, but actually then we just keep reprofiling and moving that money out to future years. So to your question around, is there a date that they formally have to reprofile? Yes, they have to do it before year end, because we then come along to executive outturn saying this is the total amount that we want to reprofile, and then that gets formally approved through the executive and kind of through our constitution. So it has to be before year end, and then we take that year end outturn position and any reprofiling requests through to be approved, and that comes through this committee.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask an extra question and come to Councillor Bowick and Councillor Reid again. On 5.11, it says the joint venture that's not going ahead yet. And then it also talks about the remaining underspend post reprofiling relates London Road Industrial Estate, et cetera, et cetera. So we've reprofiled London Road, but it's still going to be underspent. So, I mean, are we basically in a situation with some projects where we don't want to lose that, having that budget line, but we're just continually pushing it forward, basically?
Yeah, exactly. So there can be some of that where just, for a variety of purposes, it goes through there. Or we might have had different funding come through. So, for example, we've had some net funding around London Road, and this we want to prioritise using external funding before using any of our own funding first. So, that's where things often change quite quickly. Is if government suddenly turn around and say, "Well, hey, there's a grant for £2 million for a scheme we had in the pipeline anyway. We'd much rather utilise that funding than use council's own funding."
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Holmes, a couple of specific reprofiling line items. Brookfield's expansion. We were planning to spend just about £800,000 on that project this year, and now we're forecasting only a quarter of that to be spent. So it's a substantial pushback to next year. What's the impact going to be on our children and young people with SEND needs?
I'm happy to make a comment on this if that's right, Chair. So part of this is we've had a conversation with the school association about who's going to pay for what.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you. And slightly much less money, but this year anyway, but slightly unnerving. £30,000 set aside for the SEND strategy infrastructure delivery. That whole 30,000 has been reprofiled. So that means, to me, that means no work being done on it this year.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, a lot of work is being done around the sort of SEND strategy and having a look at what different options that we've got there, what potential investments might come through actually as well into the future capital programme. So there is absolutely work going on around that and working through the, so delivering better value programme through the government as well. So yeah, absolutely I'm committed to spend through there.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Question to Mr. Holmes. So 514, we might not have the right person here, so maybe it's not a flying question. But deferring that amount of IT spend is a little bit concerning. IT people normally like spending the money when its kit comes end of life, and that means end of sport, patching in particular, most concerning security patching, and I can see networking on there. Can we take reassurances that the equipment will at least stay in extended support to get those security patches?
Yes, so yeah, we have had a look at those, and yes, yeah, there will still be some support there. It is a case though trying to sweat that asset for as long as possible. As you say, IT colleagues do like to have kind of the latest kit, and in many areas, yeah, we have put quite a lot of IT investment in, but for some of those projects. And they're not all just that we're not going to do them. For example, the telephony project, the procurement of that came in underspent, and so it's not purely about let's just sweat the asset for a year longer. Some of it is actually the spend is coming better than we were expecting.
Sorry, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Chairman. And just a very specific one here, Joseph, is 5.12. The work at Thiel Railway Station is being reprofiled. So there's 1.97 million. That's my local station. And I was there a couple of times this week, commuting in, and the work's progressing really nicely there. And I think looking at the Network Rail website, it's due to be completed by the winter. So I'm just wondering, is that realistic that we're going to need to reprofile it? It might be one to sort of get back to me offline about it, but it looks to me that that's going to be completed within the year.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. Yeah, I will come back to you on that, Councillor McKinnon. I don't know the exact answer off the top of my head. I will say Chair, Councillor Cottingham's put his hand up as well.
Thank you. I'll just take Councillor Pattenden first and then Councillor Cottingham. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. 7.1. Let me just get the piece up. Yeah, it talks about programme being dependent on sufficient resources internally and externally, being available to support delivery. So, yeah, what resources are we dependent on there, Joseph? And how do we ensure that we can get hold of them?
Yes, Chair, thank you, Councillor. And yeah, a lot of that is sort of project resource. So you know, we mentioned the under the revenue side of things, the financial review panel, and for example, in the projects team, for sort of random reasons, we had either people acting up or successfully moving into other posts within the council as a promotion. So we actually approved today going back out to recruit some of those project posts. So that's one of the key bits of resource that we have to support is project posts. And just through random reasons of people getting other roles within the council, that is where we need to bring in additional support.
Okay, great. Councillor Cottingham.
Yeah, just picking up on thank you, Chair. Just picking up Councillor Reid's point over IT services. So obviously within our corporate risk map, the IT risk of external attack, hacking, etc., is almost top of the list. It's certainly from my own perspective, in charge of corporate services IT, that is something which we take a really close eye on, and with my monthly updates with Andy Best, and also with Joseph, it's something which we have, as I say, a monthly update on how things. I think it's even just today there was in the news, police authority, I think, was in Greater Manchester. A third party was hacked regarding police data, etc. So it is something, as I say, from a ransomware denial service, we're very much, as I say, within our risk map and ensuring that we wouldn't jeopardise our IT security in any way by deferring any capital expenditure.
Thank you very much. Reassuring words. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? No. Okay, again, pretty thorough set of questions there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming along to present and answer those questions. Again, this item is just for discussion and no vote is necessary. So thank you very much indeed for that. Right, moving on to item 9, appointment of task and finish groups. So as members will be aware, we sought volunteers to be on the COVID task and finish group. And we now have those volunteers. So that's myself, Councillor Bowick, Councillor Clark, Councillor Dick and Councillor Pattenden. I had volunteered to be chairman of the group, but I'm very happy for somebody else to volunteer to do that, should they so wish. Don't all rush at once. Would you like to do it, Councillor Bowick?
Okay.
Yeah, fabulous. Well done. Thank you very much. Yeah. Great, very good. And I mean, as colleagues know, we have got quite a full work programme, and one of the challenges we're going to face is prioritising that. So if you could volunteer for task groups, and if you could encourage your colleagues who aren't on this committee to also put themselves forward for things, that would be very much appreciated, because the more we share the work, the easier it will be. So we were going to begin meetings of that task group in September, but that's been pushed back to October for various reasons. We did have some discussions with Carolyn Richardson and others about what that programme of work might look like. So if I can ask Mr. Oliver to deal with Councillor Bowick on that as chairman of that task and finish group, and complete the preparations of that and look for dates for those meetings, that would be great. Any questions on that? No. Thank you very much indeed. Item 10, Health Scrutiny Committee update. Councillor Vickers is unable to be with us this evening as chair of Health Scrutiny, so I have a report to read out for her. It says on Tuesday this week, the Health Scrutiny Committee met for the second time this municipal year. The 2 substantive items on the agenda were access to primary care and continuing healthcare. Representatives from primary healthcare and the Integrated Care Board presented papers and answered members' questions. Key issues discussed regarding access to primary care included the capacity and access improvement plan, the use of additional roles and communications with the public. The continuing healthcare item focused on the peer review report and the ICB updated members on the progress with the all-age continuing care transformation plan. A mouthful. There were also updates provided by the ICB and Health Watch West Berkshire. The next Health Scrutiny Committee is on the 12th of December. On the agenda will be children's mental health and emotional well-being and maternal mental health. The Health Scrutiny Committee is in the process of determining the work programme for meetings in 2024. Members are welcome to put forward suggestions for items to be considered in the work programme. So I suggest if councillors have got any questions that they put those to Councillor Vickers in writing. Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Item 11, Executive Forward Plan. Items due to be considered by the Executive in the coming 6 months are shown on the Forward Plan. Members are invited to consider the Forward Plan and decide whether to review any items prior to the relevant meeting stroke decision. So do members have any questions or comments on this item? Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Not on anything, nothing specific, but just a general question. What is a key decision?
Multi-board, I think.
Yeah, if I can answer, it's anything that's multi-board, and I think it's over 500,000, Joseph.
Yeah, there is, it's set out in sort of statute what a key decision is. So yeah, it's a apply to many wards. There is a financial, it's either 250 or 500k. And yeah. So and determining where it's a key decision then implies that it's got to be on the full plan, got to be a record of it, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Any other questions, comments? The ones that are highlighted in yellow, Mr. Oliver, why are they highlighted in yellow?
I'm not entirely sure. I've literally just downloaded it from the website, so I'm not sure what the highlights actually mean.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. So that's for noting then. Thank you very much, members. Item 12, Scrutiny Commission Work Programme. This is to invite members to review the work programme, propose additions or changes, and whether these should be considered as part of a scrutiny meeting or a deep dive by the Task and Finish group. Members are asked to note the proposal to review the potential topic around recruitment of foster carers. So this is something that Mr. Oliver has put forward and I think is in the pack or was a supplementary to the pack. Yeah. So page 123, you'll see the paper that Mr. Oliver has given to us. Thank you for that, regarding recruitment of foster carers. And we mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the finances. This has been proposed via corporate board, actually, and this will go to executive in December. Is that correct? That's what my notes say. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Coe. And also just to remind members, we do have the joint working meeting with the executive on the 19th, which is next Tuesday. So the idea of that is the whole of executive and the whole of this commission come together. We get to present about our work programme, executive get to present about their priorities, and also senior members of staff will be able to do the same. And then other people will withdraw from that session and members of scrutiny will be able to sit and discuss in more detail about what they would like to prioritise. And just to remind members, at the meeting we had in June, Mr. Oliver gave us a methodology for prioritising items, the paper methodology. So if you, ahead of that meeting, would like to remind yourself about what paper stands for, and have a bit of a think about how we might want to prioritise things. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think that's going to be our biggest challenge. What do we focus on? And we have to be mindful of the fact that every task and finish group we do and every paper we request demands officer time. So we need to be mindful of that also. Any questions, comments on what we've got on our chart so far? Obviously, Yes, and then councillor Pound. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can I please request if we have a permission or chance to look at the library services?
Okay.
Particularly the reason I'm bringing out this one is the key decision for the 21st of September involves engagement with the parish and town councils. What it means is that I would like to understand is from the capital one, which I've not raised the question because I know the answer, that the library service is stretched because parish and town parishes are not contributing. That's what is mentioned there. So the parishes are not contributing because either they don't want to, or they are not budgeted for, or there's no preset for it. For example, where I come from, Speen Parish Council, we've been asked in the last 4 years, the previous administration, that they contribute £1 for every household. That's almost £4,000, which is 5 to 10% of the total precept, which is a very big amount. So to expect parish councils to contribute for a statutory service for the district council is going to have an impact. So can we review that one in future to see, like, is it going to be the norm going forward?
Yeah.
Or
And my understanding from attendance at parish council meetings is that the council does give figures to each parish about how many people in that parish have actually used the library. So I take your point about the number of people who live there.
Yeah.
But I think there is also information given. But it's a sort of vicious cycle, isn't it? I think in some regards, because I think some parish councils say, well, only X% of our residents are using the library, so we won't bother to contribute. And then there's less money for the library. And yeah.
For example, we contributed from Speen from my side for the mobile services because we don't effectively see that library services are like used from the parish that much. But yeah, the finances are stretched for parish councils as well. So just to expect that arbitrary amount. And we have done in the last 4 years, and sometimes we rejected. So that's where I want to see like how parish councils would be engaged for.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if we can make a note of that. Councillor Patton, did I see your hand?
Yeah, thank you. We're doing a lot of door knocking around West Berkshire at the moment. We know from that the Royal Mail service is not particularly highly regarded. I wonder whether we can invite them to come before us and give us a review of how things are going and how they see things going forward.
Sure. I think that would probably be quite a good idea. I know that they have got a lot of staff vacancies and illness and so on. I think in a lot of areas now, people are only getting their post once a week. I know that's certainly the case in where I live. I don't know whether that's the case anywhere else. Councillor Bowick.
Can I just come back to Councillor's point about the libraries? I know a bit about this.
Yeah.
I on the executive when the whole library challenge was met some years ago. I just wonder whether focusing entirely on parish contributions is kind of doubling up work, because in the overall review of the library service, that surely will be addressed, because it's not certainly not delivering the revenue now that it once was. So there's been quite a lot of change in terms of engagement in the parishes. Perhaps that could just be a feature that we pull out of in the overall library review. Just a suggestion.
Okay, because I think that review has been delayed somewhat, hasn't it? Because I think we were supposed to look at it on the 20th of June, weren't we? And it's been pushed back. Have we got any update on when we might see that?
I believe it was going to Oxford, but I don't know the results of what happened with that. I don't know if other directors know.
Okay. Yeah. Is this on this particular point, Councillor? Yeah, go ahead.
As a previous policy holder on including libraries, the issue is that the actual requirement by government is that we produce a library. So technically we could just keep Newbury Library and close the rest down. That in my view is unacceptable. And we have to find a way of affording to provide libraries to our residents. But clearly times are tight. They were tight this was last reviewed in, I think, 2017 from memory. And I think parish has got to come up for mark, I'm afraid. They should do. And I can hear that Lambourne has already budgeted for next year already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to go into the debate of this one, but what I want to make a point is, I'm glad you are agreeing, Councillor Williston, that technically it's not a service which parishes and town councils need, but it will be needed for a lot of parishes because they are far away, then they can't obviously access it. And my point is, it's not about services alone, which we will come to that, but it's the money or is the expectation from the councils they contribute beyond their population who you're using the library services. For example, I've given the exact figures. We can refer to previous asks. Speen Parish Council was expected to give £1 per population, or like which is 5,000, which is 10% of our precept of our budget. We haven't budgeted for that. Our precept, that is 10% of our precept. So it's putting pressure on all parish councils. Effectively, it is double taxation. So whatever the previous administration, your point being, like it has come up with as an idea to ask for parishes, it's effectively double taxation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I suggest, Mr. Oliver, if we go to the officers that are responsible for the libraries review and raise these issues that members have raised this evening with them, and say to them, can they be mindful of the fact that we would like them to comment on these issues when they do eventually come to this commission? Would that be acceptable to members? Yeah, great. So then they won't be broadsided when they come here. If they know ahead of that time, then they can address those issues when they come along. Great. Thank you very much. And returning to the Royal Mail, do any colleagues have any comments on Councillor Pattenden's request about the Royal Mail? Yeah. Okay. Now, as we know, as a commission, we can request for anybody to come along and speak. It's up to them whether or not they come. But then obviously an organisation has to make a calculation about whether it's a good idea to come and be seen to be transparent and communicate with us. So hopefully they would be amenable to that. So I think if we can investigate, Mr. Oliver, who we might contact to invite them to come along, and they can come along, I think, tonight, like DCI Evans, and just give a presentation and we can ask questions. Fabulous. Anything else that members would like to add at this point? No. Okay. Good. Thank you very much for that. So I believe we have now reached the end of the agenda. So thank you very much indeed. If I could ask you to remain seated until the Zoom host has confirmed that the meeting is no longer being live streamed, I would be very grateful. Thank you very much indeed, members and officers, for your contributions this evening.